You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hi, this is Roy Thomas, and you're listening to the Epic Marvel Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Epic Marvel Podcast. This is Amazing Spider-Man, Episode 3A, covering a period of Spider-Man from 1966 to 1967. This is going to be our review of the first half of the Amazing Spider-Man Epic Collection called Spider-Man No More. I am your host, Kurtis Findlay.
And I'm your co-host, Frank Martini.
And Frank, which issues are we talking about today?
So we will be covering issue 39 to 46 plus annual 3, which is the beginning of the Romita days on Spider-Man.
Yeah, so if you listen to our last episode, we finished up our talk about Steve Ditko and all of his issues. And so the way the Epic collections break, and this is the same for the omnibuses and the essentials and everywhere, they like to put a direct split right after Ditko's last issue and Romita's first issue. So that's where this Epic collection starts, is the very first Romita issue.
Which is a great jumping point. You will learn along the way a lot of things, but as we will discuss, a lot of the status quo changes from that first issue, and it's also very easy to get going and because there is not that much history to cover and to know beforehand.
That's very true. I think the only thing you really need to know is that Peter graduated from high school and is now starting his college days, and Aunt May, of course, always ill, perpetually. And I mean, the wonderful thing about this era is the way that they write. The stories are maybe 1 or 2 issues long, and then they move on to another thing in the next issue. So, and they do a great job of bringing you up to speed on anything that you really need to know. And at this point, the Marvel Universe is still so new that there isn't a whole lot of continuity that you need to know about. It's all being written for the first time here.
Well, one of the things that you need to know is that most of the major villains of Spider-Man have been established in the previous 38 issues. So you name it, you got it. I mean, Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Sandman, the Vulture is there, the Scorpion is there, Electro is there.
Kraven.
Kraven, all the classics villains you can imagine. They have already been established, they have been introduced by Lee and Ditko. What we felt in the last few issues of the Ditko era, it's really difficult not to say disco era whenever you're talking about Ditko, but that's an entirely different word for sure, is that we were going into a more thugs, bad guys, mob kind of environment. And here we are going to jump in a slightly different location with a more supervillain of the month kind of situation, knowing that Ditko was plotting the book and giving it really a different vibe, especially towards the end, even though towards the end he was less inspired, as we discussed last time. But here, the relationship between Lee and Romita will be different. The mood of the book is going to change very quickly.
Yeah.
And really going into a different direction. So you may not have liked the first 2 volumes and get into a different kind of Spider-Man vibe with Epic 3.
When you mentioned that all of the major villains have been introduced at this point, it's like I think that's a good note to make. And from now on, we don't get as many new villains, because when you have a rogues gallery as well established and as interesting as all of these Ditko villains from the early days, you want to keep using them. And because there are so many, it takes a while to cycle through all of them. So in this book, we see the return of a bunch of the villains that Ditko created, and Romita in this volume, in Epic Collection number 3, we'll see 3 new villains that are all mainstays of Spider-Man, the Spider-Man mythology. 2 of them we'll talk about in this episode, and 1 of them we'll save for the next episode. But it's some really interesting stuff. Just one note about the actual Epic Collection itself. I want to note that this book, what is the date here on the inside here? It was printed in 2018. There was a period in 2018 where LSC Communications, who is the printer of the book, used a different type of paper, a much thicker, much coarser paper. And you can tell that these volumes are really, really thick. They're thicker than most Epic collections. This book doesn't even hit 400 pages. Like, it's actually small in terms of Epic collection page counts, but it looks just as thick as the other ones.
Yeah, it's true. I was surprised by the low amount of stories and issues contained in this book, actually.
Yeah, and if you compare this to X-Men Proteus, which came out just recently, which has a very similar page count, it's a way thinner book because Marvel has started using thinner paper. So they experimented with this thick, coarse paper for, I don't know, maybe three or 4 months or something like that. So there are maybe a dozen epics that have this thick, coarse paper, and I actually don't like it. A lot of people do like the thick paper, but I find that it's so coarse that it's a little cumbersome to hold the pages open. And I can't even, like, you have to be in the very center of the book in order to just be able to lay it flat on a table and for it to stay open because the pages are so coarse. So it's not my preference. I prefer something a little bit thinner, not like spit through thin, but a little thinner than this. Anyway, that's just a minor nitpick. The actual construction of the book is just fine. The reproduction is really nice. Other than that, it's good.
It's really funny because I'm holding currently, the Starjammer, X-Men Starjammer book by Dave Cockrum next to my Spider-Man.
Yep.
Because it was hanging there. And the X-Men book is 480 pages. And it's thinner than this collection.
Right.
Just,
exactly.
I've got the 2 of them, one next to another, and it's really surprising.
Yeah, they definitely used a bulkier paper. I think it's cheaper paper. I think that's why they went for this, because it's cheaper. And this is like in the days when the paper costs were rising. So they were looking for alternative paper to use that would cut down on the cost without having to raise the cover price.
It could have been worse. It could have been worse.
Yep.
It could have been a quad book.
Absolutely. Oh, those quads. Okay, let's talk about our issues here. We're going to start right off the bat with issue number 39 called How Green Was My Goblin. This is one of the most iconic covers for Spider-Man in all of Spider-Man history. This cover of the Green Goblin holding Peter Parker tied as they're flying through the sky, and his, like, you can see the suit underneath his ripped clothes. Like, there's just something about that. Like, you see the cover and it's like, oh man, he's in big trouble. Not only that, but Goblin knows who he is. Like, this is a big deal. You get the sense of dread. It's a fantastic cover, and what a great way for Romita to burst on the scene. It's like he really pulled out all the stops for this. The issue itself, it's actually kind of it's actually this is the good one. The next one is a little bit more of a downer, but this one, this issue, Goblin tracks Peter down. We get to know more about Norman Osborn, and through the course of this, we find out that the Green Goblin has arranged things, a trap for Spider-Man, and Spider-Man falls for the trap, and Goblin follows him home, finds out his secret identity, and then kidnaps him. And then at the very end of the issue, this is the big spoiler for people who haven't read this yet, we find out that Norman Osborn is the Green Goblin.
Well, it's a spoiler for people who have never read Spider-Man, never seen a movie of Spider-Man. Basically, why are those guys listening to this podcast?
The thing that struck me really odd, and this is, I've read this issue before, so it's not a surprise, but for those people who are not, like, if this is the first time they're reading these issues now after having seen all the movies, after seeing how everything's laid out before. I think it's surprising that Peter Parker doesn't really know Norman Osborn at all. When it's revealed to him, he's like, wait a minute, that's Harry's dad. Like, that's how he knows him. He's only met him maybe once and doesn't know anything about him.
Yeah, because he only met him once at the Daily Bugle.
Yeah.
That's about it. And by at that time, he wasn't even mentioned. The name was not even mentioned.
Right.
So it makes sense that he's not that familiar with the guy, actually.
I'm just used to, and I think it's a better shock with things like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, where Peter has a good relationship with Norman throughout that movie. So when it's revealed that he is Green Goblin, it's actually quite a blow. Because this became a father figure kind of for Peter. And whereas in this one, it's like, sure, we know it's Harry's dad, but that's not a shock. And at this point, Peter's not even really friends with Harry. So it's not even that he cares about Harry. It's strange.
It's something which is played much more in the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, for sure.
For instance, with the Vulture in Homecoming.
In Homecoming, yeah, that's right.
Which is basically the same approach than they have in the first Tobey Maguire movie with Norman as well. But somehow, first of all, we have to keep in mind that the Goblin was unknown at that time. Nobody knew his identity, so it came as a shock. It also comes as something which was an editorial issue, because it was mentioned several times that there was a disagreement between Ditko and Lee about the identity of the Goblin. So the reveal took longer than expected. And so I guess Lee wanted to maybe mark his territory with his first issue and reveal right off the bat who was the Green Goblin, just maybe to piss off Ditko and say, okay, now it's my book. So
yeah.
I'm when it comes, there were only two mysteries left from the Ditko days. It was the identity of the Green Goblin and Mary Jane.
Right.
And the two get revealed in 4 issues.
Yeah. I do agree that I think Stan was like, Ditko's out, I can do whatever I want now. And so he introduces this concept right away. It would have, even if he had waited for 6 issues or whenever Peter gets his apartment with Harry, that would have made a better impact. But Stan really wanted to rush it. And it just reminds me of like when we learn about the Crime Master in a few issues back, it was a nobody. It was somebody we'd never heard of, a crime boss that had never been in the book before. And I feel like this is kind of the same way. It's Green Goblin is revealed to be someone that we literally didn't know the name of before.
Yeah, he popped up for a couple of issues, looking kind of a shady guy, but there was nothing that could have made us think that this guy was the Green Goblin, because there was no clear connection.
Yeah.
Even though in the 90s, Ditko said that it was his idea from the beginning and that he planted Harry and Norman in the book. Well, that's retroactive interviews, so there's no way we can say that's true, that's not true. So
right.
I think that the connection that you mentioned is something that we will see afterwards. Well, we're not spoiling what we are going to talk about in the next next issue, but the connection would be much more established, and the father figure aspect. It will never get as in that level, I think, in the book, but yet there is a bigger connection. The bigger the relationship gets between Harry and Peter, the bigger the connection and the relationship with Norman as well.
Yes.
So it will give a bigger shock whenever Norman and the Green Goblin comes back.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about this artwork for a little bit. Right off the bat, Romita busts in with a very clear and distinct style. He knows what he's doing. He knows how he wants to approach these characters. And Stan, we made a note in the last episode that Stan's dialogue had kind of been cut back, and we didn't know if that was because, like, I suspect a lot of it was Ditko was framing his artwork so that not a whole lot of dialogue could be fit in some of the panels, but also maybe stuff was late or Stan just didn't care anymore because there were like those whole fight scenes that didn't have dialogue in them at all. And but you look at page 8 in this epic collection, which is the 4th page of this issue. And Peter's talking to the doctor, and look how much dialogue is just in this one page.
Yeah, I was exactly on that page thinking, oh my, there's so much to read, so much copy in this page.
And the second to last panel where there's the nurse, it's like the nurse didn't have to say anything in that panel at all. It had there's no point. But Stan crams it in there anyway. And then you look at the next page where Peter is walking by his friends, and each one of them has to say something in each panel. And this is classic Stan Lee. Like if you read X-Men, every single one of the X-Men has to have a line in every panel. And so Stan's kind of going back to his old ways now that I think he is back in charge of the book.
I think it changes along the way.
Yep.
Because if you flip on the book and you go to page 260 or something like that, so much further, you see that it changes a bit, and maybe it was a tighter plot and tighter connection, and then after a few issues, I believe that Stanley left a lot more territory to John Romita.
Yeah, I agree.
Even though they had been working for 7 or 8 months already together, maybe more than that, actually, less than a year, I would say, because previously to these Spider-Man issues, Romita was working on Daredevil,
right,
and had already established a good working relationship with Stan, because Romita mentions in interviews that they were plotting together and they had work sessions where they were discussing the issue and the content of the book. So that was that. And I believe that Lee has mentioned and Romita has mentioned as well that the Spider-Man cameo in 2 issues of Daredevil were a sort of tryout in Stanley's mind for Romita replacing Ditko.
Oh, yeah.
Because he felt that there would be a change sooner or later, and it may be that if Ditko hadn't left, maybe Stanley would have fired him somehow. So that was a tryout for the look and feel of Spider-Man for Romita. Although the look and feel is completely different from the look and feel of Daredevil. If you read them back to back, you will see how much Romita is trying to ape Ditko's style in the first 6-7 issues.
Yes, definitely.
Mimicking the 9-panel pages, using and I've read this week. I was reading a Romita interview when he said that he was using a very thin pen to lay out the pages, to give a Ditko vibe, so to have this very thin look and feel, while he was using a thick brush on Daredevil. And also the choice of the inker, which we didn't mention, it's Mikey DiMeo or Mike Esposito, as we know him, who's inking, which is completely different from Frank Giacoia inking Romita over on Daredevil. So that's if you look at the issue 20 of Daredevil, which is one of the final issues by Romita, and this issue, you wouldn't feel like there's only a 2-month gap. There's so much difference in the look and feel and the style, and that's Romita trying to mimic Ditko, but it wouldn't go very far.
You can even see it in a lot of the poses. If you go to page 13 in the Epic Collection, which is page 9 in this issue, the fight on the top of the building with all those goons. There's the 4th panel where Spider-Man's swinging in and he's holding 2, like a web line in each line. Like that's such a Ditko pose there. And you if you flip later on in this book, you'd never see Romita do a pose like that anymore. He has his own language of Spider-Man that he quickly develops through the pages of this Epic Collection.
Yeah, because what I've seen, because I spent a bit of time trying to analyze a bit the look and feel, Romita tends to have Spider-Man engaging a shoulder all the time, very frequently in panels. Spider-Man is jumping, so I'm trying to show you. Obviously, you can't see me, so it doesn't make any sense. But you would always frequently see Spider-Man with his arm engaged and with his shoulder in front in the layout, something which is absolutely not Ditko, because it was more of a acrobatic look and feel to Spidey.
Right.
And we see that change. We see in a few issues Romita trying to do his best Ditko impression, but it doesn't last.
Wow. Very interesting to look at it through that lens and see where he begins and how far he goes. Yeah, even the inking style, because Mike Esposito doesn't stick around as the inker for too long, and then Romita ends up inking himself. And that's where we see a lot more of his style, I think, come through in just the line quality, the way he spots blacks and everything. It just, it's different a few issues down the road here from what we see in this. And Esposito is just generally a thinner inker in general. I think he generally speaking uses a thinner brush, but this still looks really good. This issue, everything he does with the Goblin and the fights, and they're actually a good team, Romita and Esposito. I like them.
Yeah, they work well. It will be less interesting in the fourth Epic collection when we get Don Heck doing the finishes,
while
Romita is only doing the layouts, and Esposito is finishing. And it's a completely different book, completely different look and feel, much blender, I would say, than what we see there.
We'll see that actually in the annual number 3 with the Avengers is that team up.
Yeah.
So we'll discuss that when we get there.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the kind of things that we would see in the fourth Epic collection.
Right.
One of the things, there's so much to discuss about this issue, because I think that really Stan Lee wanted to show that it was a different time for Spider-Man. If you read page 5 and 6 of this issue, which is 9 and 10 of the Epic collection, you see that until the last issue, Peter was a lonely guy. He didn't want to mingle too much, wasn't really a social person. And suddenly, even though he's anti-sick and so on and so forth, so we get the usual background that is a good excuse for Peter not to spend too much time with people. We see that he starts showing a more human aspect and being more friendly with Harry Osborn. And maybe it's 2 or 3 pages later when he goes to the Bugle. The issue before, he was such a jerk when he was speaking with Ned Leeds. And when you get to page 18 of the Epic collection, you see that he has a completely different approach and a different way of dealing with things with Ned. So I think it's one of those, changes that Lee wanted to put in Peter's life and in Peter's behavior.
Reading that scene with Harry was actually quite jarring because it seems so out of character for Peter, having just read all of the Ditko stuff. But at the same time, it's extremely familiar because this is the Peter Parker that we're so used to. This is his character that has been so established over the years now. And yeah, like you said, it's a drastic change, and you can see that Stan is like, no, this is now the direction that I want Peter to go. And same with Harry. He has a change of heart all of a sudden as well. And same with Gwen. Gwen has a change of her attitude. She's not as snobby and uppity anymore. It all changes in this issue, everything. And Ned Leeds has brown hair in this issue.
That's a running joke.
Yeah.
That's the running joke of the book, actually.
Oh, yeah. I also like how Peter wrestles with the idea that the Goblin now knows his secret identity. He goes through all the motions of anger and fear and everything like that as they fight on the front yard. And it's just really well written. I love how it's laid out. The pacing is great, and it's exciting. And you really, really feel that tension. This is kind of the first time that his identity has come under threat in a serious way. Now, we can think of when he was unmasked by Dr. Octopus in issue 14, I think it was.
But he was sick. Nobody believed him.
No one believed him. Right off the bat, it was not taken seriously. But this is a completely different situation and really, really interesting to read.
I think it's one of the really first cases of such a situation, because the cat is out of the bag and it cannot go back in.
Yep.
Well, we'll see that it can, but it will be a permanent threat over the book. And even though they would always find an excuse to have Norman getting his memory back and losing it again, and so on and so forth, doing the back and forth. It's something the Joker never found out. Well, maybe he did recently, but he never found out that Bruce Wayne was Batman.
Yeah.
Nobody found out that Clark Kent was Superman, and then used that to threaten him. And so that's a very different dynamic in the book, and the sense of the threat is much higher, because you're like, oh, this guy knows all his family, his friends, his environment. So that's a major threat, and that's something that, for instance, Brian Bendis would use with Daredevil and would use with in Ultimate Spider-Man as well, and that's the first time it took place in comic books, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So, issue 40, called Spidey Saves the Day, featuring the end of the Green Goblin. So that's like, hey, let's spoil the story from the title and the cover. So we got the same team here working on the book, Lee, Romita, and Dimio. This issue is all about the Green Goblin. It's a heart-to-heart conversation between the Green Goblin and a Peter Parker who cannot fight and who's attached to a chair. So it goes through all the origin of the Green Goblin, the various appearance we had, seen from his point of view, from his perspective. And obviously, in the end, we get a big fight between the two, with a sort of Deus ex machina, and using, oh, he had a bump on his head and now he's lost his memory.
Yeah.
Which is classic, to be expected, but it works anyway. It will be reused, and it will happen a lot more in the future. But here it was a fresh thing. What is interesting in this issue for me is that, well, it's a very verbose issue, of course. It's more of a review of everything which has happened before between the two, rather than a proper action issue. We don't have a lot of extra, so a couple of pages when Betty comes back and Aunt May being worried, but out of the 20 pages, 14 or 15 take place just between the two of them, and that's something which is very unusual and different. And it's one of the very first stories I read, the Green Goblin, when I was a kid. It's a favorite of mine, even though it has flaws and it's way too verbose, and the plot is not moving along very well, but I kind of like it.
It does have its issues. This, though, learning so much about Norman all of a sudden, I found was an odd choice. And I think this maybe is more of Stan's way of writing, whereas Ditko would just introduce the concept of a villain with a gimmick and use that as a foil to make Peter's life more complicated. This fleshing out Norman actually gives him much more of a focus and makes him an actual character. This is more than we know of any other villain that we've come across so far in the Ditko run, except for maybe the Lizard, who has a pretty good backstory. All of the rest of the villains, they're just kind of gimmick characters who don't have a huge backstory. Even the Rhino in the next issue gets more of a backstory than even the Chameleon or the Vulture. It's interesting. So I think Stan is really positioning the Green Goblin to be Spider-Man's main villain. I think he sees probably the parallels with the Joker and how popular the Joker is, but also recognizes that, Spider-Man, this is his chance, Stan's chance to create that ultimate arch nemesis for Spider-Man, which I think up to this point was probably Dr. Octopus.
Yeah, well, if you count how many times both appeared in the book previously, it should be the same amount of issues, I think. Maybe the Goblin appeared more.
Okay.
But just on top of my memory. But Dr. Octopus was actually the more threatening one.
Yeah. And even he didn't have that big of a backstory. Like his backstory is very
it's one page.
very, very lame.
He's a scientist. He was working on atomic stuff. He blew up, and that's it.
But that doesn't go into his motivations. That doesn't go into his personality or his upbringing. Like that's just literally just how he became Dr. Octopus. Whereas this issue tells us about his personality, about Norman and how he relates to Harry and how he runs his business and all of that leading up to how he becomes the Goblin. So it's interesting that in that aspect to find out about him like this.
Yeah, but it also ties with what we've seen so far. So the first appearances of Harry, the Strom issue, which was issue 37, they all that connects. And the previous appearances. So all that is sort of tied up, and you could easily imagine that it's really the end of the Goblin because of the memory loss. So it's a strange choice at the same time, but yes, it's logical because Stanley had written himself in a corner with what he did in the previous one. He had to find a way to undo the identity aspect because the threat would have been permanent and it would have been too much of a shadow on the book. So it makes sense to find a proper solution to temporarily at least get rid of the Goblin.
Yeah. The other big change that Stan makes is that he makes Aunt May all better, like instantly at the very end of this issue. It's like she's been suffering this for months now in the book, and all of a sudden, she's okay now.
Yeah, and she looks younger than in the previous, in the Ditko days.
Yeah, I mean, she still looks really old, but a little bit younger.
Yeah.
But and so they still will play with the don't get excited or you'll have a relapse kind of a storyline that goes through the next several issues. But at least she's not on her deathbed constantly like she was through the Ditko years. Okay, let's move on to issue number 41. This one's called The Horns of the Rhino. It says, beginning a great new era in the ever-changing life of the world's most amazing web spinner. And I don't know that I'd call this the beginning of a great new era. I would have thought that maybe the Green Goblin story was the beginning of a new era. Or maybe they felt like that was just wrapping up plot lines from Ditko's book, and now they can start in their own direction. But in this issue, there's actually a bunch that happens in this issue. John Jameson, who we haven't seen since Spider-Man #1, returns to the book. This is JJJ's son, astronaut son, whom Spider-Man saves from a falling space capsule. He's got some sort of space spores that have affected him, or they don't know if it's affected him, but the government's keeping a close eye on him. And someone, we don't know who, has hired the Rhino to kidnap John Jameson. So we meet we meet the very first brand new Romita designed character here, the Rhino. And Rhino has always been one of those characters that is like, he doesn't usually get a whole lot of development. He's played up as a kind of a dumb oaf, and that's about it. And so this is kind of how he starts too. This is kind of all he is just the guy who runs into things, doesn't have really any more strategy than that. And his design is kind of cool.
Yeah, it took so many years to develop a personality and a background to the Rhino. I think it was in the 2010 or back in the Brand New Day era. There was a lot of stories. Some of them were written by Mark Waid and Dan Scott, probably giving more background, giving him a tighter origin and a more dramatical personality compared to what we see there, which is basically a mindless ragging brute.
Yeah. I think that he's also the only Romita character that appears in the old Spider-Man cartoon.
Oh,
all of the rest of them are the Ditko characters.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah.
It was, I haven't seen that cartoon in so many years, even though it was the beginning of my Spidey love, but I haven't seen the cartoon in years.
Another big change is that Peter and Betty have their reunion, and Stan completely writes off everything that's happened before. Like in just one panel, Peter just says, now that she's returned, I don't feel anything. Whatever we had before is gone. Nothingsville. So there, he's just written that right out of the story, and we're going to see that she and Ned are going to go off. Oh, by the way, Ned's hair is blonde in this issue.
Yeah. Yes.
They're going to go off in the sunset and have their own life, and we're not going to hear from them for quite a while. I mean, we will still through the next few issues, but this is the beginning of the end for them, as far as Stan's concerned.
You see that panel on page 7, which is 53. Now she's returned and nothing's spilled.
Yep.
It's reused in the death of Jean DeWolf.
What, really?
Yeah. That by issue 3, the death of Jean DeWolf,
yep.
Betty is very close to being killed by the Sin Eater.
Right. Oh, okay.
And Peter has memories of Betty and how they met and so on. And if I'm not wrong, because it's this panel which is used to get his memories of when he first met her and when they were sort of dating. I need to have a look at that, but I'm pretty sure that's it.
They chose the wrong panel because he was thinking the wrong thing at the time.
Exactly. I think that we can easily start to see that Romita is doing his best, not to mimic Ditko, but there are some things which are typically Romita. For instance, page 9. When the top panel, when you have the two kids speaking, arguing, that those kids are so Romita looking,
right.
And those characters being in the foreground while there is stuff. There is 3 levels. First the kids, then Spider-Man, then the screen with the Rhino.
Right.
That's such a Romita panel that, so you can see that. Even though, and I also read that Lee specifically told Romita not to have Peter to be too good looking or, being too muscular and so on. But he can't help it because you see that issue by issue, slowly, he changes completely. And the way he looks changes dramatically from issue 38 to 40 something, it would have changed completely.
Romita also does a lot of different camera angles, which is something that Ditko didn't usually play with unless it was like a dramatic shot during a fight scene or something like that. But on the same page that you were talking about on page 9 of the issue, the third panel where the security guards or the agents are stopping Peter, and it's just it's an upshot. And it's just simple, and it's slight, but it's something that Ditko never really did. He didn't play with the camera angles like that. Any of his just regular conversational shots were always just straight on eye level.
Well, we also need to keep in mind that Romita was a romance artist before he moved to Marvel. So we let's just think that a year before that, he was doing only romance comics at DC.
Right.
So he did like 8 or 9 Daredevil issues. So whenever we get into those social pages, I think that he reused a lot of what he had learned from doing romance comics, especially obviously on the women, because they all look beautiful. And that changes completely from what we saw before. But also, I think he's trying to use more dynamic views for those shots, because that's the only toy he had in romance comics to make them look more dynamic.
Oh, for sure. When it's just talking heads with the drama like that, it's just talking heads. You have to make it different and visually interesting. It's somehow. And so, you can definitely see that he brings that to the table here.
Oh, and we have another new character introduced in this issue. It's Peter's bike.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Peter's bike. So this is also another change, I think, in just his personality, growing up and becoming more of a person, more of an adult. So, yeah.
Whenever I see this bike, I remember I don't know if you've read Spider-Man Blue.
Oh yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah.
The story by Tim Sale and Jeff Lubb. And whenever I see this bike, I recall this book and the first or 2 issues when Peter is taking Gwen on the bike, and you have this beautiful splash page that says, "Okay, let's fall in love," which is one of the most emotional splash page of Spidey I've ever seen, I think, and it works wonderful. So this bike always triggers this connection between these Silver Age issues and more modern aspects and the fantastic Spider-Man Blue miniseries.
I was going to mention Spider-Man Blue because that story retells all of the issues we're talking about in this episode, starting with the Green Goblin story, going right through actually to a few issues after that we're going to talk about in the next episode with Kraven and Vulture. And it just frames it in such a different way because Peter's reminiscing about his time with Gwen. And that story is one of the best Spider-Man stories. Like, it's such a good story.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Issue 42, The Birth of a Superhero. So it's the first issue with only Lee and Romita working on the book. So Mikey DiMeo, Esposito is gone. So we get a full Romita feel to the book. So the beginning of the book is quite dramatic because it appears that Spider-Man is robbing a bank. And we will find out along the way that there's a reason for that, of course. And this issue continues a lot of the plot elements that were dangling from the previous issue. So the spores that were discussed actually give powers and turn John Jameson into a powerful person. The Rhino is back as well and is trying to escape in order to fulfill his mission and capture John Jameson. And well, we see a fight between between John Jameson and Spidey. It feels like the spores have also altered his personality and the way he behaves after being manipulated, I would say, by his father in order to go and grab Spider-Man because apparently Spider-Man robbed the bank. They have a fight together and they find the proper way to get rid of the powers and the powerful John Jameson by the end of the issue. And we get a major. Actually, it's not that much of a major issue until the last page, when we get such an historic moment. And I mean, you cannot mention that without having a smile on your face because it's such an iconic moment, and it's been repeated to death. And you know the line is, and you know it's been reused in books, in movies, and so on and so forth. But that first appearance of MJ is really something that's memorable, and it's completely uneventful compared to what happens in the issue, which is action-packed and where a lot of stuff is going on. But that last page, that's something for the ages.
It is, yeah. So I only have one issue of Spider-Man from the Silver Age, from this era, and it's this issue here.
Nice.
Yeah, and so it's always great to, when I read through these epic collections, I sometimes with these old comics, I'll pull out the old issue and read that instead of reading it through the book because I just like that experience. And so I was able to do it with this issue. John Jameson, poor guy, he just goes through the ringer over and over again. Yeah. Like he just can't take a break, and like later on down the road, he turns into a werewolf, and then like modern day John Jameson has been, I think, nearly killed because of Carnage and what Carnage is doing. He's a security guard at Ravencroft, and it's just he doesn't get a break ever. The poor guy.
He worked for. He was the pilot for Captain America in the Grunwald era as well.
Oh right, yeah, I forgot about that.
Well, I must say that I read that like 3 months ago, so that's why I remember. And it doesn't play a big part in those at the time, but he's hanging and he's part of the crew that Captain America had assembled at the time. You know, when he was trying to go all over America to solve problems for people and so on. So John Jameson was his pilot, and that's the only moment when he doesn't suffer from some sort of problem turning into a werewolf or something.
Ned Leeds is in this issue again, but this time with orange hair.
Yeah, maybe they got him wrong versus Flash Thompson.
Yeah, maybe. Through this issue, Peter Parker is starting to notice Gwen a lot more, and Gwen now has her famous, iconic black headband. But It's definitely a change for Peter as he's starting to actually notice his friends, and we can see that Stan is trying to get the shift from them hating him just because he exists to now actually talking to him and having conversations. So they still have their jabs at each other, especially between Peter and Flash, but it seems like it's more in fun a little bit more than just, actually picking on them. Yeah, exactly.
It's completely a new approach for the way he behaves socially, and the look and feel of Gwen is, I mean, obviously, once again, the romance aspect is so obvious here. And also from one of the Romita interview I read, he said that he specifically asked the colorist not to put any yellow in Gwen's hair. So that changes, but he wanted really to have a almost white hair so that she would stand out so much among the other characters.
Definitely provides a contrast with Mary Jane's red hair, which is pretty much just black with red highlights.
Yeah.
I found this issue to be a little sloppy in just its pacing, because we have this flashback right in the middle where Peter reveals why he robbed the bank earlier, because it was a bomb and he was trying to save the bank. It's like, that was such a weird reveal, and it doesn't make any difference to the actual story. They don't revisit it afterwards and clear Peter's name or anything like that. Like, it's just an oddly placed scene that doesn't seem to help the situation. Like, it seems like they just had to create some reason for John to go after Peter in the first place, but then, they don't bring any conclusion to it.
It's sort of, because the right after the flashback, Spidey goes to see JJJ, and he says, "Ask the bank, and they would tell you that no money is missing." But that's about it. And it could have happened in the first pages, and the pacing would have worked exactly the same way. The flashback was not necessary in the middle of the story. It kind of slows it down. So yeah, it's a bit clunky.
And in the end, though, we don't see the public, like him clear his name with the public. He's still a bank robber, according to the general public who witnessed this bank robbery, even if the bank knows that. Like, for us, the reader, we should have had a little bit of closure there.
Yeah, it's true.
But otherwise, it was a pretty good two-parter with John. And now we're moving on to issue number 43, Rhino on the Rampage. This is the issue where we find out a little bit more about Rhino's story, how he got his hide. We have a nice flashback where we find out that he took months and months of injections and treatments, and until he was ready, like his molecules would able to adhere to this special suit that he's been given. So it really is, it's part of him. And I like that aspect. It's such a different take on just the roughhouser. I don't like a lot of modern retellings of Rhino's origins. Like, I think of Rhino from Ultimate Spider-Man, the comics, and he's just wearing a robotic armor. It's not the same thing as this, actually another second skin fused to his body. It's a completely different aspect, and I don't like that. It also really changes Rhino's character if he can get out of his suit, because part of who he is the fact that he is always the Rhino. He's never anyone else.
Yeah, and he doesn't have a name.
Right.
It's one of the villain whose name gets revealed much later.
Yeah.
Is completely the Rhino and no one else. You don't see him in his CVs or something like that. So that's very true.
One of the things that I think we forget about Mary Jane in these early days, like, of course, we know her iconic first line, "Face a tiger, you hit the jackpot," but then all of the other dialogue in these early days of MJ is so 1960s. She speaks with all of the lingo that Stan can possibly think of and sticks it in there, and it's very, very dated, and some of it is like, oh man, why is she talking like this?
You know that for someone who's not American, and most of what she says doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right.
I don't actually understand most of the things she's saying, come on, let your hair down. I mean, I believe it means be cool or, chill out or something like that. But
right.
I couldn't figure it out.
That's funny.
And also, there are so many mentions of Rock Hudson
Yeah.
in those early issues, which in retrospect are so embarrassing. Obviously, Stan couldn't know he was gay, and because he was such the hunk of the era. But
right, yeah, he wasn't out at this point in the 60s. He didn't
no,
come
no,
out till
no,
the 80s.
no. Until actually he was diagnosed with AIDS.
Or in the 90s, yeah, in the 90s.
Yeah. When he died, almost when he died. So it was quite a shock for everybody when he came out, and because he announced he was sick, and very soon afterwards he died, I think. But so that's one of those things that looks so dated now, of course.
Yeah, you have to look at it in the time frame, in the context. But yeah, and all of Mary Jane's dialogue is that way too. It's like she's constantly calling people dad, which is so funny. But that's just a way that they want to bring in this culture.
The dads and the Nothingville and the whateverville, which was apparently much used.
Especially comparing to Ditko, who he felt firmly placed in the 1950s, even though this was approaching the late 60s. Now Stan has brought us, I think, into the 60s with clothing styles, or maybe Romita's responsible for that part, but with the dialogue, and we see student protests and stuff like that, and like this is definitely the 60s now.
Stanley would always leave issues of Vogue on Romita's desk as an inspiration, and Romita says that there were no, save from the King's wife, there were no really older ladies appearing on the book, and he was buying the magazine called 17 to get references of the clothing.
Oh, okay.
And I guess he was doing that before also from his romance days.
That makes sense.
So, yeah. I think that one of the things which is interesting in the book, because it will have a broader and broader impact, is the fact that Frederick Foswell appears every issue. And he's always this kind of...
He's just lurking.
Lurking character. So maybe it's because he's a journalist, maybe he has an agenda, he has this split, not personality, but persona, because he's playing also, he has this Patch character who's working with the cops and partly with the mob. And so, he's a kind of in-between character, and he's always there, always in each issue. So you can definitely see that Stan had some good ideas about him, and he was always lurking.
Right.
Up to the issues we will mention in the next episode.
Kurt Connors also comes back in this issue here to help Spidey develop a different kind of webbing. And this will play directly into the next issue, which will feature the return of the lizard. So that's kind of cool that we see him come back, and that Stan's thinking more along the lines of kind of foreshadowing, I guess, in his storytelling. And
I really like the connection between Peter and between Spider-Man and Kurt Connors, because I think it's really nice to have. He's not a father figure. He's this older person, but also friendly with him. They are both scientists, so they can have different connection. So that makes the lizard's appearance more dramatic than your villain of the month. So that ties very nicely, because Connors was there during the Master Planner saga.
Right.
He's back again here, and we get the lizard right afterwards.
Hey, I just realized something. Tell me if this got concluded in the very last Ditko issue. There was a $20,000 reward on Peter Parker, and all the mob bosses were after him. Did that get concluded? Did the reward get called off? Because that was a Norman Osborn thing.
Yeah, that was Norman playing this, and no, I don't think so.
It was just forgotten about.
Yeah, and I think it's even reused in issue 38, actually, where the Goblin proposes money to attack Spider-Man, but no, the 20K thing,
It
I
just
don't
got
think
forgotten.
it gets. Yeah.
Okay.
And you see, I was flipping through, and page 98, which is page 10, and the following 99, you see how the layout of the page has changed in just 3 issues.
Yeah.
Because the 9-panel layout is almost gone. And when you see page 10, you see that final panel, bottom right, with Spidey, the way Spidey moves, that's classic Romita, and it's already there.
Definitely, right.
So from time to time, we will go back to the 9-panel grid, more towards the end of the issue, but you can already see the kind of layout that Romita does appearing very clearly early in the book.
Definitely. I like how Spider-Man defeats the Rhino in this issue by creating the webbing that will dissolve this outer skin. It's a little reckless, I think, because they don't know how it would react to his. If this skin is actually fused to Rhino's body, how's it going to affect if you're melting it off? But it seems to have done an okay job.
Yeah.
And I think this concludes the John Jameson section as well. His story is wrapped up, and we're not going to see him for a while now either.
We get back to the kind of depressing endings that we had from the Ditko era. That's going to play for quite a while, with the always a final panel with a sort of depressed Peter, because they need money, because Aunt May is sick, because Spider-Man is troubling his life, and he's a thorn in his side, and so on and so forth. It's something which is back, so that we don't get too comfortable with the fact that he's socializing and spending time with people now. But at the end of the day, he never truly wins. So it gets back with this issue, and we'll see that with, I think, sort of culmination with issue 50.
Yeah, definitely. He's playing the long game here. It's definitely a build up to 50 for sure. And he does one of these issues. He has some wins, and they make a note about that on the last page. So we'll talk about that one for sure too.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take a little pit stop over to the Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 3 to become an Avenger. This I found was kind of a silly issue overall.
Oh yes,
definitely. I would have loved to see. I don't know. It's exciting to think, Spider-Man joining up with the Avengers for the first time. That would have been exciting. But the way that they do this is just kind of, it's not great. First, we have layouts by John Romita with pencils, like finished pencils by Don Heck. This is what you were mentioning before, and the inks by Mickey Demio. And so we have a different look. You can see Romita in these drawings, but most of the faces, the line, and all, like it definitely looks like Don Heck as well. The way that he draws the eyes and everything. So it's really kind of a grab bag of a bunch of different styles all together, and it's a little out of place in this collection.
Yeah, and I must say that I've never been a fan of Don Heck, because depending on the inker, you see a completely different aspect. So most of the time, his layout, his page layout, is kind of stiff or bland. I think, if I remember well, I think he was also a romance artist back in the 50s. But he doesn't have a very dynamic kind of approach to his drawings and layouts. So that's never a good sign for me when I see him. And I think that the combination between Romita and Heck works better in the opposite, when Heck is doing the layout and Romita is inking. That's what he did on his first. The first work Romita did for Marvel was Avengers 22 or 23, and he was inking Don Heck, and it works a lot better actually than that.
So in this issue, Spider-Man is recruited, or the Avengers try to recruit Spider-Man to join their team. They don't really know much about him, so they're going to put him through a few tests in order to see if he's really Avengers material. And one of the tests is, go get the Hulk. Bring him back over here to us. which is kind of ridiculous. But I'm sure it was exciting to see, the Avengers and Spider-Man in the same book together. And this kind of goes, like, they're really hitting it home with these annuals. The first one has all of the Sinister Six, like all of Spider-Man's villains in one book. The second one has a momentous meeting between Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, and now we have the Avengers featured in this annual. So these are big deal books here. Unfortunately, the premise is just silly.
Yeah, it's the idea of the book is more interesting than the book itself, and I think it's really what you will see in many of the annuals. Because we won't get into the next annual because it's at the end of we will mention that in the next episode. It's not such a great story as well, and I remember that even the one with the Red Skull the year after with Peter's parents, not that great either. Great concepts, but may have been better as single issues than getting more pages and more time, while the plot is fairly straightforward. Even though this annual is only a 20-page story, because it's then there were a couple of reprints or maybe more, but it's not a great story overall.
One of the funniest moments to me in this issue is that they're making a big deal about Spider-Man. Like, we got to recruit Spider-Man. How do we find out more about him? We need to have a vote and everything. Everybody's got back together. And this is the time when Thor and Iron Man are not on the team. And I think Ant-Man and Wasp, they're all not on the Avengers right now. It's only Captain America and Hawkeye. No, actually, Goliath and Wasp are back on the team because Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are on a leave of absence. But Thor and Iron Man are not. So to bring them back is a big deal. And what I find really funny is that they, in order to find out more information about Spider-Man, they contact Daredevil. They called Daredevil to their Avengers headquarters, and I can just imagine Daredevil's like, "Oh man, the Avengers, they contacted me. They want me to be part of their team." And then they're like, "Hey, can you tell us more about Spider-Man? We want Spider-Man on our team." He gets the shaft. It's really funny.
They could have called the Torch. It would have made more sense.
That's right. It would have made more sense. But I think they wanted to promote Daredevil's book because they put in references to all of the appearances and little editorial boxes there.
What is interesting about this issue is that it reestablishes more Spider-Man in the Marvel universe at the time, because Ditko had completely faded out that aspect, making really Spider-Man a loner, especially towards the end of his run. And also, it shows that Spidey can take the Avengers and can take the Hulk.
Yeah, that's right.
It shows how powerful he can be.
Yeah.
The very good scenes of the book are the scenes with the Hulk, and the page 18 of the issue 127, where Spider-Man discovers the secret identity of the Hulk, and they have this conversation, and it shows a more human aspect and of the character, and saying, "Okay, I'm not delivering the Hulk to the Avengers. I don't know what they would do with him," and he pities the Hulk somehow, and lets him go, and chooses not to become an Avenger, even though he would certainly benefit from it.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting move to say, I don't know what the Avengers' motives are with the Hulk, because you would think that he would just trust their judgment, but he doesn't. He second guesses and eventually lets them just take care of their own problems, and he goes away. So that was an interesting end. And we have a depressing ending for the annual as well. Why does nothing ever go my way?
Classic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, let's keep on going.
Yeah, so issue 44, called Where Crawls the Lizard. So the big deal of the story is that Aunt May is going on vacation. So for someone who was at death's door not so long ago, that's a major improvement. And she's going on vacation in Florida, of course. And at the same time that Aunt May is leaving, Dr. Connors also is at the same station to welcome his wife and son coming from Florida. And as they arrive, he starts to transform into the lizard again. and fully transforms into the lizard, which establish the main theme of the story, which is Spider-Man trying to find out where the lizard is and trying to get him back and to cure him. Along the way, we get into more socializing pages with the gang getting together for the first time. So MJ, Harry, Flash, Peter, and Gwen all together, which will establish the dynamic of the relationships of the book for the next 100 issues almost. So that really gels the complete evolution of the character, and the book ends with yet another depressing panel, and with Spidey getting his arm strained, and so having to and being defeated by the lizards. So that means that in the next issue he has to fight the lizards with only one arm, which changes the level of risk he's going to take to solve the problem.
I love it. I think it's a great plot device and a great way to tell, to make the story a little just that much more interesting. I also really like Romita's lizard. He becomes more and more dinosaur-like as the years go by, but I just love this simplistic look where he still wears his lab coat, and he has just some great scenes and great poses during the scenes where the lizard is like trying to break into the whatever it is where he's trying to rob something. It's just very dynamic. The one splash page where he says the lizard lives again. I love it.
Yeah, it's really great.
Lizard is always, I think maybe I said this in one of the first episodes, but Lizard's always been one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. And initially it was because when I was a kid, I found out his name was also Kurtis. And so that always is something that you attach to the characters that have the same name as you when you're a kid.
Yeah, for sure.
But then he's just an interesting character. He's way more two-dimensional than, the Rhino or the Vulture, whatever. He's just so much more interesting. And I love how they've developed him and his family, even though his family is used as plot devices all the time. It's great to see how it affects the way that Spider-Man works and how it affects the way that Kurt Connors deals with problems. Like he just ran away from them in the train station in this issue.
And also the fact that they have a different relationship means that Spider-Man has a bigger responsibility to the lizard than he has to Dr. Octopus.
Right, yeah.
It's completely different relationship, so he can't cut loose on the lizard because he knows he's friends with the alter ego of the lizard, so that's a different approach, and I think it's one of the things that's very well played in this issue and the next one, I think.
Flash Thompson is going for a draft physical in this. He's going to become a war hero, he says. He's joining the army. And probably, I guess, sent over to Korea or something? Or is it Vietnam?
Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes, it's Vietnam because it pays out like 80 issues further when we have a two-parter with some Vietnamese character that he met when he was in Vietnam. So yeah, Vietnam.
Oh, right, of course. Yeah. So yeah, he is going to be written out of this story, and what happens with Aunt May a little bit later is kind of, these are the last couple characters from the Ditko days that Stan is kind of getting rid of. He's really getting rid of all of the old cast and creating his new characters here. I like this issue a lot. I think it was really, really well done. This whole two-parter, in fact, going into the next issue, excellent stuff. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you see how much. Once again, the look and feel of the book, how it's evolving issue by issue. It really feels like Romita is fighting with his own style and keeps on trying to use those 9-panel grids on the social scenes. But when it comes to the action scenes, it's gone, and it looks like he can't do it anymore. It's very obvious because he's trying to use, on page 148, he's trying to use one of those Ditko panel you mentioned earlier, on the when Spidey's hanging by two webs.
Yeah, that's right.
So it could have been sort of Ditko panel, but when you see the top of the page, with especially the second panel on the top, with this shot coming from the back, that's not something Ditko would do. So it's once again the nice look and feel and a great evolution.
And the drawings are just moodier as well. He uses a lot more shadows now at this point. And it just, because he's inking his own stuff, I think he has a much nicer line than Demio did. He interprets his own drawings a little bit differently, I think. So, really neat.
Yeah, I think that those issues that we have here with Epic 7 is the best Romita experience you can have, because it's the only moment when he's inking himself. Because most of the time afterwards we will have Mike Esposito or Jim Mooney inking Romita. When it's on FF, it's Sinnott or someone else. On Captain America, it's Joe Sinnott as well, or Frank Giacoia sometimes. So it's always a different experience. But when one of the rare times you have Romita inking himself, it's in those issues and in Epic Collection 7, Goblin Last Stand.
Wow.
Yeah, I was saying, that Romita is one of my favorite artists, so obviously I'm quite into it.
Oh, it's great. It's great. Love the information. Let's keep going over to issue number 45. Spidey smashes out. This is, we start off right off the bat. Peter's frantically kind of looking for the lizard, trying to figure out where he is. Eventually tracks him down in a train yard where there's a shipment of reptiles. Meanwhile, the whole gang is trying to figure themselves out. Flash is, the way they are writing now, Flash is definitely, he gets a line here and there, but he's really kind of pushed to the sidelines. The focus is way more on Harry now.
Yeah.
You can see that their friendship is building. And with Gwen and Mary Jane both in the picture, it's like, who's going to ask out who? Kind of like, there's definitely this romantic tension between all four of these characters, but no one's really making a move anyway.
It's completely an Archie, Betty and Veronica and Jughead approach. It's so obvious, especially between Gwen and MJ. It really feels that way, and Romita has mentioned several times, and Stanley as well has mentioned that it was clearly his inspiration.
There's a great scene where Spider-Man and the Lizard fight in a refrigerated train car, and it all turns blue. Like the colors are all just using different shades of blue. Like I think there's one panel that has 5 different shades of blue in it, and it's very effective. You really get the sense of cold, and I love how Peter thinks about, like he knows, especially with his arm the way it is, that he can't take the lizard as he is. So how does he actually defeat the lizard in a smart way? And he figures out that lowering the temperature of the lizard will help subdue him.
And who said that comics were not educational?
Oh yes, I've learned so much from comics over the years.
Yeah, me too. And for instance, I didn't know that about reptiles, for instance. So that's one of the things I learned from reading comic books.
Unless it's not true, maybe Stan just made it up. I guess we should double check all of his facts. I don't know.
Well, whenever you go into a zoo or something and you have the reptile area, it's always very warm.
That's true. Yeah.
So makes sense, I think.
My favorite page in this issue is page 11. It's page 163 in this issue here. Yeah. It has just 2 panels on it. And the flow of the drawing, just the layout is just fantastic here, because you get, if you look at this top panel, you see the train car with all the snakes coming out of it. Your eye goes to, of course, the top word balloon that the lizard is saying, "After him, my beauties." And then your eye is drawn across the panel, across Lizard's arms, over to his other speech bubble, or the pair of speech bubbles where Spider-Man and Lizard are talking, and then your eye is brought down the tail of the Spider-Man balloon over to Spider-Man, and then leads directly into the thought balloon that Spider-Man is thinking. He's gone too far. So it's just the flow that you get, this really nice curve that leads directly to the other thought balloons in the second panel that Spider-Man is saying. But I've no time to worry about that now. And then your eye will go over to Lizard's speech bubble that says he is our enemy, and brings you down through the lizard and then the curvature of all of these reptiles, the two crocodiles, curves around and brings you back up to Spider-Man so you can see Spider-Man in the foreground. I think it's just a brilliant layout, and it guides your eye, I think, exactly where you need to go in order to experience this panel. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, because it's those are wider panels,
Yep.
so it's always easy to, when you have a tight panel, to show the dynamic that panel should have. But when you get to bigger panels, you have to make it readable, and it's very efficient because you have this I don't know the word for that in English actually. When you cross a rectangle, when you cross it, from top right to bottom left.
Yeah.
The
diagonal.
Yes, that's it. It always has to be here in the layout. Most of the time, you don't see it, but it's always there. But the wider the panel gets, it's more complicated. And the way that the lizard is drawn, it shows you diagonal, like you said.
Exactly. And even the way that the lizard's drawn in the second panel with his arm outstretched shows you like the arm is drawing your eye to the lizard's body, which then takes you down the crocodiles, the way the crocodiles are curved.
I think that Romita is very good for that, but really, and even though I'm not that fond of his style, the master for that is Ross Andrew, who drew quite a bunch of issues of Spider-Man. He's basically the 70s artist of Spider-Man, and he was a master for that. I mean, his storytelling is incredible. You can take any page and it's so clear where you have to position your eyes whenever you read. But it's a very good example you're showing here.
Yeah,
I think.
Definitely.
One of the things which I really appreciated and found really good in this issue takes place on page 3 of the issue, 155, page 4 actually, that the lizard doesn't understand Kurt Connor's equations.
Right. We've got a Hulk situation here.
Yeah, exactly. They have completely two different personalities. So, and it's like he's not mentioning as Connors as himself. It's someone else completely. So it's very even further than the Hulk, which is somehow kind of into a knowledge that is both Banner and Hulk. Here, it looks like it's two different personalities entirely.
And this is something that changes with the lizard from time to time. Sometimes he has his intelligence, sometimes he doesn't.
But yeah, I think it works, and I also enjoyed the fact that, like for the Rhino in two issues before, Spider-Man uses his brain to save the day and not just fights through and wins by fighting, but also outsmarts the villain. So issue 46 called the Sinister Shocker. So we have this new villain which is introduced, called the Shocker, who appears. It's really a villain of the month kind of thing, with this guy being robbing bank and having those powers thanks to a mechanical device that is using to give electromagnetic shocks or vibrating shocks. So that's we get a bit of origin and backstory to the character, but that's really not the main topic of the book. And the main topic of the book is really more the evolution of the situation of Peter Parker, with Aunt May coming back from Florida and moving with Mrs. Watson, so Mary Jane's aunt, and Peter being asked to move in with Harry, and choosing to do so. So by the end of the issue, the status quo has completely changed. So Peter is no longer living with Aunt May, and now living in a nice flat paid by Norman Osborn in the center of New York. So it's different. It's really the end of the Ditko era, the early days of Spider-Man, and we're getting into a different kind of book by then.
Yeah, and he'll still, of course, check in with Aunt May all the time, but she is not a focal part of the story anymore. She is not going to be the thing that ties Peter to to his old life, or the reason why he can't be Spider-Man. We're not going to deal with her as much anymore. I also like the fact that Harry provides the place for Peter is brilliant, because Peter is always hard up for cash, so he would never really be able to afford a place on his own. So they take care of that along with like the scholarship for university. So he really doesn't have a whole lot of expenses anymore, which is I don't know if that changes the dynamic with Jonah and the pictures and all that, but
not that much.
Yeah.
Not that much.
So the only thing we have to do is say goodbye to Flash Thompson, and which will happen soon enough, and then all of the cast has really changed. And I know that Harry and Gwen were characters created by Steve, but they were not developed by the time Steve had left the book, and then also Stan has now sort of completely changed their personalities anyway, so they're totally different characters.
Yeah.
The Shocker's nice. I like the Shocker, actually. I think even though he's kind of a villain of the month, like you said, he has a cool gizmo that he uses to display his powers, and his costume design is nice. I like that too. A lot of the things that people, like artists nowadays or since then, have done is they just make his costume lines on fabric. Whereas this one, with Romita's own inking, you can see the textures, that it's actually like the lines are actually sewn parts of the fabric, where he's wearing an insulated outfit so that he will be protected against his own vibrations. And it's a nice design for the costume. His inking gives it that kind of puffier texture, which a lot of people these days don't bother to add in their details.
Yeah, especially the boots, for instance, which look like a bit like snow boots.
Yeah.
But it's very likely to be something for isolation.
Insulation.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep. And then at the very end of this issue here, there's a great heartwarming scene where Peter confronts Aunt May, because he's like, I don't want to tell her that I want to move out, and she's like, I don't want to tell him that I want to move out. And then they come to the realization that this is what they both want, and they go off together. And Peter gets to his new apartment, and he's still not happy. He stands there in the middle, and he's like, what does he say here? Perhaps in some mysterious, strange way, when I gained another identity, I lost the capacity for happiness. He's like, he has what he wants, but why does he just not feel satisfied with this?
Yeah, it's something which, once again, is building towards issue 50.
Yep.
But kind of gives an overall impression that Peter is always a depressed person.
And actually, that's something that I want to mention at the very end of the last issue. What I meant to say this, but I didn't. We have the same kind of a moment on the last page where Peter throws his costume in anger. It's like, every problem I have is caused by Spider-Man. And then it switches to a happy family unit with the Connors all together, saying if we're only like this because of Spider-Man. It's an incredible contrast between how he views his job as Spider-Man and how they view his job as Spider-Man.
One bit of French trivia for you.
Okay.
Page 190, the top panel. You see the pose, the Spider-Man pose that you see on the top panel?
Yes.
It was cut out of reused from that issue in the French magazine we had in the 70s and the 80s, where Spider-Man was appearing. We had the cover, obviously, and page 2 was a sort of credit page that was giving that on page 1 you had Daredevil, because in that magazine we had Daredevil, Iron Man, and 2 issues of Spider-Man most of the time.
Okay.
Because we were running so behind the US by then that in 1997 in France we had stories before Gwen's death.
Oh man.
Which took place so we were like 4 or 5 years behind. Anyway, and we had this credit page that was presenting all the characters and the stories. And we had one drawing of Daredevil, one drawing of Iron Man, which was done by Tosca, if I remember well. And we had this bit of Spider-Man, which was cut out and that I saw for years and years and years in that magazine because every month it was the same credit page. And I didn't know where it was coming from. And I hadn't read that issue in quite a long while. And when I read it this time to prepare the podcast, I was like, wow, this is the drawing that I've seen for years. And it was, and every French reader, which is my age, so between 35 and 50, has obviously seen that in that magazine back then.
Awesome. Oh man, ingrained in your memory.
Well, yeah. Well, it's full of useless stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay, well, I think this brings us to our halfway point in this volume. We're going to take a break and resume our talk next week with the rest of the issues in this epic collection. But just right off the bat, it's incredible to see the transition that Romita does from the beginning of this book, which was good, to where he comes even halfway through this book. It's only like 6 or 7 issues later, and does an incredible job. And Stan's dialogue is easier to read. He's streamlined his text a whole lot more, and like you said, the panel layouts have changed to make it easier to read as well. This book is going in a very good direction.
Yeah, it really establishes the book for the next 80 or 90 issue, I think, up to the death of Gwen Stacy. Really,
yeah.
It established the dynamic between the characters, the look and feel of the book, this kind of romance mixed with action book that Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man becomes, and still somehow is today with variations. But clearly, it established the classic Spider-Man that everybody has come to love.
Definitely.
In my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed our talk today, and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you just search for Epic Marvel Podcast, and search for Epic Collections on Facebook to join our Facebook group where we can talk about this volume and more. And otherwise, we will see you next week. Thanks again for joining us for this episode, Frank, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Take care.